welcome to How to Write Even Better Adventure Module seminar here at GaryCon 2022. We have had great success in the past of how to write adventure modules that don't suck. If you have missed any of those seminars, we have available the compendium of all that knowledge down at the Goodman Games booth, many miles that way. So it's been a popular seminar, so we're kind of doing it again now, and hopefully we've learned stuff since we put out the last book by trial and error, and we hopefully are going to give you the fruit of our hard-earned experience along the way here. So we will be talking, this is basically going to be largely a question and answer seminar. We can talk about stuff, but if you have any questions, whether about writing game design for your own group, whether writing game design professionally, trying to break into the industry, stuff like that, we're more than happy to answer those as well. All right. So before we get too far in, I am Michael Curtis. I am the Director of Product Development for Dungeon Crawl Classics at Goodman Games. I have been working in the industry professionally since 2009, so more than a decade now, and it just seems to, I don't know how it started. I don't know when it's going to end, but I'm going to keep going on for the ride for the first one. And with me is, we'll start on this side and then go this one. So, you are, sir, and why are you here?
Hi, so thank you everybody for coming. My name's Stephen Newton. I am an author. I have my own third-party publishing, Fixed Called Adventures. So I've done several DCC and MCC Adventure under that line. Plus I write for Goodman Games. I've written 3 of the horror modules, an MCC Adventure, which you can go through the portfolio. I'm sure you guys know what I've done. So very nice to meet you all.
Hi, I'm Brendan LaSalle. I'm a staff writer for Goodman Games. I've been professional in the industry since 2002, and I guess I'm best known for the X-Crawl adventure line, the game X-Crawl, but I've written a bunch of other stuff for Goodman and for other publishers as well.
And I'm Julian Bernick, freelance writer for Goodman Games. I've done a lot of DCC and MCC stuff. Most recently worked on the Dying Earth project, which hopefully will be in our hot little hands around September-ish. Actually on track and looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Also some forthcoming X-Crawl and Empire of the East stuff, and last one there.
Thank you, guys. All right, but before we get too far, a couple months ago, we brought back what we call the Mystery Map Adventure Design Contest, where we basically did a partially done adventure map, and we said, give us a 1,000-word pitch on this, and we opened it up to the masses, and we got a good response, and we went through them. We winnowed it down to a group of finalists, and so those finalists are Zachary Batalden, who did Ordula the Undying and Her Everlasting Enclave. We did Jess Gabriel Krohn, who did The Rift of Seeping Night. Ariel Chury, who did The Adoration of the Aspic Alchemist. Christopher Messelmore, who did Indomitable Will of the Empyrean Princes. Jeffrey A. Regner, who did The Stone Peddler of Falun. And Stefan Surratt, who did The Inheritance of the Honey Queen. So let's give them all a big round of applause. And it was not an easy choice, but in the end it came down to Jess Gabriel's Crohn's The Rift of Seeping Night is the winner of the Adventure Mystery Map 2022 contest. So good job, Jess. Thank you very much. All right. So with that out of the way, then we let's get down to adventure design here. So as I said, we've probably got 50 years with at least adventure design experience here, at least professionally, and then far much more of that unprofessionally. So I think we could best rattle things off, but I think it would probably be best if you people have specific questions about some things. Let's start with that, and then hopefully that will open up the discussion to more people and everything on. So does anybody have something burning that they would like to ask us, about their own adventure creation design, or
I'm a home GM, but what are the pitfalls you see with published or unpublished modules? What are the traps people fall into to make it?
All right, that's definitely the two-part question. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Sure.
So so I will say that I will start professionally, because that's an easy question. Is that not following, not doing what you've been asked to do. You know, it seems like a easy one, but like if you get asked to do like, you know, like a 1,000-word, you know, adventure, or 1,000 words, just 1,000 words of stuff like that. If you tune in 1,200 words, you know, I mean, that's part of the, especially when you're getting started, you know, very indolently, a lot of what a company, whatever, you know, a professional is going to do is it's basically kind of a test. You know, it's like, can you hit a deadline? Can you do what you've been asked to do? You know, can you do this without somebody saying, you know, over your shoulder saying, you know, you have to do this, you have to do that, have to do that. That's like the biggest pitfall. And I have seen people who have been otherwise very, very creative, but they cannot hit a deadline for their life. And that's fine if you're working for yourself, because, you know, but if you're working professionally, you have to do a manuscript. You have to get that manuscript handed in time so it can go through editing. So you can have like the artist who is working the work, who's doing, you know, and especially in the days of pandemic, it used to be like we could say like, okay, if it's done, like it'll take 4 months to go through printing. That's not the case anymore, because, you know, because of delays on, you know, material and all the rest of that stuff. It's just, it's a complete mess. So I will say most part of this, that's a big pitfall if you're working in this professionally. I think personally, what do you guys think? What do you guys? I'm sure everybody got their own answer.
Sure. So this is the one that I have made mistakes on before, and I've had editors catch me on it. Don't lock the front door to the dungeon. Don't make it where, if you put a thing that's going to keep them from actually getting to the action, if they get stuck there, or, you know, for whatever reason, they don't bring a thief, the thief dies on the way up there, whatever it is happens, suddenly you're stuck with having to hand wave a solution, and that's always going to take away from the experience, you know, where you're like, okay, well, I guess eventually you find a way to open the door. Nobody wants that, you know, so don't make it, you know, it should be easy to actually get into the adventure, and there should be multiple ways both to access the adventure, but also for people to find out about the adventure. Otherwise, like the hooks that will actually bring people into it. Try to, you know, have multiple of those. You know, if you're doing a professional thing, it's good to have several of those so that people can find the one that goes, okay, this is something I can work into my campaign, a way that I can like draw everybody in. So give, you know, multiple hooks. It seems like an easy thing, but, you know, like, because it's, you don't want to catch somebody off guard with that, with just the one thing that then doesn't fit in with their campaign. So I really suggest having multiple ways in, multiple ways to access the adventure.
I would, I just saw this morning in a game I played in, where, like, don't design museum pieces. And by that I mean, like, we go into a room and there's cool stuff and they describe it, and then, but there's nothing for us to fight there, there's nothing for us to really interact, there's nothing for us to get out of it. And you can get a lot of stuff, treasure, you can get information, there's all kinds of risks, there's puzzles, there's of course monsters and so on. But they were like, just like, well, go to these 8 rooms and see the glorious stuff that I've decided to put in here that you can look at or something. And it's like give adventurers stuff to do, choices to make, risks to take, crap to win, all that stuff. But don't just show them stuff, generally. I mean, a little bit of that here and there, you know, cool, you know, a little flavor text is nice, but interaction.
Can I ask a question about that? Because I kind of seem to err on the side of like not putting enough description in, and just like, you know, this is the challenge that's in this room or whatever. And I know there's like a balance, because you want it to be descriptive, you don't want it to just be another generic room.
Sure.
So
there's, sorry, Steve.
no, go for it.
There's, you know, if you read Teagle Manor, right, there's very low context ways to approach that and say, well, you know, 5 skeletons sit around a table playing cards. Are they alive? Are they dead? You know, like, nobody knows, right? Like, I mean, and some GMs like that because they like to decide, you know, depending on what's going on tonight with this party, it's going to be one answer on Monday, it could be a totally different answer on Wednesday, and that's totally okay. If you as a judge, you know, like that. But other people want to, you know, maybe have a whole thing. So that's to taste, you know.
Yeah.
Probably you try to get it in the middle as much as possible. Yeah. But, you know, funhousey stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense, some people hate it. But if it's all elaborately constructed, you have to have enough stuff to link in, you know, about it.
My caveat to that, because I've done some of this, what Julian is describing, it has to be advancing the story. So if there's something in there, like there's the whole gallery. There's a gallery in Corpse of Love build, but it's telling you what happened. So to build suspense, you want people to be expecting what they're going to be hitting at the end. So as long as your set pieces are advancing the story, like is the PCs going to encounter this in some way? Everything has to happen on page. The one that I was going to add was, especially because you're all writers or aspiring writers, the background text, the judge's background, don't do a lot of world building. If it doesn't show up on the page, give enough just for the judge. So my rule of thumb is like somewhere between 500 to 750 words. At 750 words, I'm getting a little bit nervous that, you know, the background information is becoming, and everything else should be appearing in the text somewhere that the players can discover.
I mean, that's also, it's an interesting question because part of it has to do with kind of what your audience is, you know, and because, I mean, if we look back to like, we're now in the industry, the hobby is now, you know, we're almost 50 years in. So if you look at the stuff that like, you know, was being published in, you know, 1977 and stuff like, you have like this, there is nothing of interest in this room. Like how many of those old box texts do you have and so that? Because it was a different thing because you had to deal with like the wandering monster thing that was you going around and, you know, it was all like, can we get to the big bad guy? And now it's like, you know, those of us who kind of came up with that, we learned a lot of bad habits, which we now have to deal with because, you know, people who are being involved, you know, getting involved, you know, in the hobby, you know, in the last 5, 10, 15 years is like, oh great, another boring room. You know, it's like, we republished Expedition to the Barrier Peaks for 5e for Goodman Games. And one of the challenges was just like, wow, that first level, there's a lot of empty rooms. Like, there's literally like 200 empty rooms in that. And it's just like, that will not fly anyone playing 5e. So I had to put a whole sidebar. It's just like, yeah, just say like, okay, you know, you explore this one wing of the spaceship and, you know, you find every room and then all of a sudden, there's a door here with blinking light on. Just like cut out all that stuff. So I think but then again, there is a very, you know, there's the old school Renaissance men who are very much into like, oh, I want to play it like it was 1977, you know. And if you're writing for that, they're going to be more understanding of the purpose of like an empty room, like, you know, 8 empty rooms on the level, where it, you know, for a different crowd, it's like, this is just a waste of space. So.
Yeah. I think if you put just challenges in there without like sort of a context, after a while it comes off as a funhouse, which is not the worst thing to have. There are some really cool funhouse adventures out there that are specifically, I mean, X-Crawl is all funhouse pretty much, you know what I'm saying? I mean, there's weird flavor text around it, but it's literally challenges that are there to design just to challenge all the players who go through it, you know? So that's definitely a balance you want to hit. You have to have enough description to where it's meaningful enough that the challenges have a larger thing that they're trying to do, even if it's just to get through all of these things, to solve whatever the mystery is. You know, enough details in it that you're not just doing a thing out of context. It's not just like, well, here's another trick or another trap or another another hazard. You know, have it be like, you know, have enough detail to it to make sure that it's all leading up to something as a story.
Got a question?
Sure.
How do you think contemporary information design has influenced adventure writing? Because you've got a style like, say, DCC, which probably echoes much older ways of sort of writing adventures, you know, with read aloud text, really long sort of paragraphs and things, you know, describing rooms and situations of what might happen. And then on the opposite end, you've got these systems which become very popular, like Mothership, Mork Borg, Old School Essentials, which are essentially meant to be run on the fly with basically zero preparation. So they're really two different styles of writing. I mean, you've got the kind of more prosaic style of DCC writing, where they're actually good writers, you know, and then you've actually, and then you've actually got these other styles of writing, which are almost like kind of they're very kind of, you know, they're almost like instruction manuals, you know, and it's two different approaches. And so one question is, like, you know, what sort of approach should a writer take? Because obviously, you know, these styles of writing should become very popular. I mean, these games are highly popular games. I mean, Mothership did, you know, $1.5 million Kickstarter. You know, OSC just finished at 800. You know, it's just so it's a big audience, and like which approach should a writer take?
Well, I mean, the approach again is really what your audience is going to do. For example, something with like Mothership or something. I'm willing to bet that Mothership is if anybody's, it's 1% of the gaming population's first RPG. So I'm willing to put, most of the people who are coming into Mothership have some experience playing other RPG
Sure,
stuff.
sure.
So there's certain expectations they have learned, and so you can do a lot more once you have the experience with like very short stuff. You can build on that. But for DCC, we're assuming for the most part, it's not. I don't think. Well, it might actually. We know a couple of cases where it was people's first role playing game, but we're assuming that they're still kind of having to get used to it a little bit, so that requires a little bit more, explanation. I think that's one of the difficulties too, is you're always, if you're doing this for commercial release, some people are like, oh, there's far too much background information on this, and those are people who've been playing for 40 years, and they're like, give me 8 adjectives and I'll write an entire campaign around it. And there's other people who they've been playing 6 months, and they need a little bit of that extra stuff. So it really comes down to the fact of it's like you have to eyeball it. So so I mean, you're talking to a guy who, I did Stonehill Dungeon, which is
right.
So it's like no room has longer than like 2 sentences,
Yeah.
description of it. But that's for a very different audience, So that's really what it comes down to is who you are writing for.
Yeah.
And just, sorry to hit the obvious note, but you can't ever say this probably enough. If you are submitting something to OSE, for instance, read OSE products carefully, several of them, and then make your submission like an OSE product. But if you're doing it for Goodman Games, read several Goodman Games products and make it like a Goodman. I mean,
Right.
seems obvious, but actually really spend some time reading your target, publisher, and make sure you're actually, hey, this is going to be in the house style of these guys.
Does Goodman have a published house style or a style guide?
Well, we've been working on one. But I will say something that is even more obvious, but still people screw up. If you're going to be writing for something, make sure you know how to play that game. Because there are people. I mean, there are times when I mean, it seems like the most obvious thing whatsoever. It's like, oh, I played BX, I can write for 5e, and then of course, it's obvious different expectations or anything. So you might screw up simple mechanic stuff or just even tone or anything like that. So.
Fun part about sort of tabletop role playing is sort of the emergent kind of storytelling, or comes out, like for instance, if you meet a chicken in the first village, somehow its feathers become important in the end, right? Everyone's happy when something like that happens. I was wondering if, with all of your experience, you have any suggestions how to kind of seed those kind of things into the adventures?
Well, I'm going to say for doing things professionally, it's a little more difficult, especially for DCC. Like most of the adventures we're putting out are 16, 20 pages long, and they're kind of, we don't do the big adventure path thing. So if you're going to introduce the chicken, it's Chekhov's chicken. Like if you introduce the Chekhov's chicken in the first act, you have to make sure by the third act it shows up, and that's only going to be 16 pages of it. So, but it's a different thing where if we're writing, up against the giant Smart 6, and in the first level, they meet, the giant halfling, it's like he's 6 feet tall, and then he comes in, of course, being the giant, or it's emergent gameplay. If he's supposed to be the giant kingpin at the 11th level or whatever, then you have to make sure that it's difficult with emergent gameplay. I mean, because the giant halfling might die when you're 3rd level. So then what do you do there? So I think that's more of that's definitely less of a professional concern and more of something you deal with in your own campaign. And I know for the answer for DCC is don't introduce the giant halfling at 0 level. He's supposed to be important later on. Or if you do, make sure you have a backup.
So I'll give you a trick I use.
Sure.
So at some point we'll talk about inspiration and whatnot. But when you get to your boss monster or any of the main characters that you talked about in your story, in your head, even if it never appears on the page, write in your Evernote file or whatever you're taking, what is this guy's motivations? Why is he there? What did he do? How did they get there? And then as you tease that out in your head, you'll come up with ideas. It's like, oh, maybe I need a chicken that the players can interact with in the first act because he's the chicken god. Now, you may throw out 75% of that, but it's a trick of and it helps you flesh out characters, build some motivation and helps you with settings. Okay, I need a setting. And again, it's the world building that may never appear on page. Unless it appears on the page, don't use it, but it helps you build connection points.
Yeah. I think just sometimes all you can do are sort of include a couple of little details that then it becomes up to the judge to take those and make those. When the real emergent thing is to have that. So just make sure that you have the odd chicken in some places where, you know, without any expectation to have whatever it is, but put in a few little details. And like, you know, for me, the key to it is always visualizing it. Like I always try to picture when I'm working, what would this place actually look like? Obviously you can't put every last thing in there, but like, you know, imagine, you know, something that you would find in there that you would think interesting, either in the background, either in, you know, the concept. Put that out there for them. You know, a couple of, you know how D&D players are. If you put like, you know, a funny, you know, goblin in the beginning called Brick or whatever, then people are going to get excited about, you know, like, maybe they'll kill him, but maybe like later on down the road they're still asking about him and whatever. So just, you know, but you got to do it briefly too. You don't want to like hammer any of those things. And that's what it shouldn't be about. It should be like, put those little tiny things in there, do them in a sentence, you know, one sentence. You know, here's the thing that's there that doesn't necessarily have anything major to do with the room, but it is a detail there that then can become something that gets transferred later on. And, you know, and as the GM, then you have to say, well, what's the expectation? Do I then, you know, create a thing to, you know, for it to do later on, or do I just leave it, or, you know, whatever. And that can only come through gameplay. So, but if you put those little seeds in there, just a few of them, you know, done slightly, you know, trust your dungeon masters too. Trust your GMs, and you know, they'll get it, they'll pick it up and run with it, and then they have to trust their players that they'll find those things and they'll create that kind of play by the interactions that they have with whatever is in your dungeon.
I think it is worth saying, and anybody who's been, you know, in this hobby for long enough, been running games, you've always run in that phenomenon of like, and then you meet the, you know, you kind of just got like, whoever's just supposed to show up, literally like show up with a spear, oh yes, you have to go up to the castle, and then walk off and never be seen again to the camp ever again, and the players are like, oh, what about the spear guy? Like, is the spear guy, like, you spend the day, like, he becomes like their best buddy and everything, like, he had no life whatsoever. He was literally supposed to show up, deliver a piece of information, and leave again, so, you know.
Here's another question. How important is a good editor for adventure writing, and what does a good editor do?
I will tell you this, is like when I was younger and stupider, I thought that editors had no role except to get in the way of authorial voice, and like they should just get the hell out of the way. And then now, I cannot say enough good things about editors. Yeah. Editors, you know, they can turn our crap into jewels, and you know, I think if you're looking to get into the industry and you're going to submit something, definitely get somebody to edit it. Do not edit it yourself, because you're blind to your own writing. So, you know, it's like you will see things, because your brain is filling in things that you think is on the page, and you need another, like even if you don't like a proofreader, just like another gamer, and just like, does this make sense to you? You know, so.
Does a good editor help mechanically to sort out mechanics?
Oh yeah.
Then that obviously means that they need a really deep knowledge of the system.
Yes.
Well.
Yes.
And so getting someone to grammatically correct something is very different to having someone that can actually do both. I mean, that's a risk.
Yeah. Finding an editor who's good at both things is.
Well, you want the one person.
Right, because there are some who can do technical writing very well, and they'll be able to find at every drop participle that you put in there and change that comma to a semicolon when they need to do. But like they'll miss like the forest or the trees. Like they won't get the right, like, you know, like if we were doing something for DCC and it was like, oh, and it's 6 kobolds and a bugbear or something like that. Like grammatically it might be very well, but it's a completely different tone for the game that we're writing for. A really good editor is like, not only do you drop a participle here, but this should not be a bugbear. This should be like, you know, this should be like an insect-headed, you know, marmoset. You know, I mean, that's just going for that tone. Yeah.
But I think, I mean, to be really specific in answering, I mean, the editors and the Goodman editors are the grammar guys. The Goodman editors, thank you so much, Jen and team. The Goodman editors are, you know, very much about the writing, very much about the grammar and spelling and so on, formatting, and the mechanics, you know, checking the mechanics and making sure we don't forget the movement and the stat block and all that good stuff. I mean, not that, you know, they're not, you know, driving the creative input. That comes more from the product side and, and from Joseph and more previously to that, you know. So they're in a role of, you know, keeping the manuscript, getting it formatted right. So it's a kind of a mechanical type emphasis. Is that fair to say? I mean, at least that's been my experience.
Yeah. In my role as developer, what it is basically like, you know, once we have kind of established on like what a pitch and what a writer is doing, they will do a first draft, and then that comes through me. And then when I read it, I'm not reading it for editing thing, because I know the editor will catch that later on. You know, I'm not really looking at stat blocks like and making sure the math is 100% correct. I'm more like, okay, does this have the right feel? Does this, you know, like, is there enough here? Is there a hook to get the adventurers involved in this? Is there, you know, that kind of stuff, you know? I'm trying to just make it the best module, not mechanically, but just, you know, the thing that people would want to play, what I want to play most importantly. So there is a difference in that.
Yeah.
There's obviously a huge difference between writing for yourself to run something and writing for someone else to run it.
Right.
What is the, I won't say it's a trick, but obviously it's a process you need to go through to change the way you write. If you haven't written for an audience before, what is it that you're doing to put yourself in the mind of someone reading it who has no context, so they can actually run it properly?
Right. I think that it kind of falls in the fact of knowing your audience and everything. What we're talking about, trying to find that happy medium between enough information and too much information, because I mean, if everybody who's writing for themselves, or you know that if you jot like 3 words down, and like you have the entire counter there. So what you're trying to do is first of all, you can never cover anything like an adventuring party might do. So like if you try to, your adventure is 1 encounter long, because it'll take you 10,000 words. Like, okay, if they decide to get a baby panda and cover it with like, you know, honey, you know, like, because they'll come up with it. But, so you have to kind of make sure that, you know, your writing is clear enough that the game master, and more importantly the players, can know what's going on. You don't want to describe everything. I think like Stephen King talked about writing is telepathy. Like you have an idea in your head and you want to put that idea in somebody else's head, but you want to be able to do that with as little as possible. So you have to be comfortable when to let the person's imagination fill in the blanks. So, you know, so there's a little bit of art to doing that, you know. That's something which really requires a lot of, you know.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of trial and error.
Right.
You know, and the trial and error that you want to get that trial and error out of the way before you actually publish something or put it out there. So the only way to really do that is to first write it and then give it to somebody else who knows the system well and have them run it.
Yeah.
And like as many times as you can do that, you know, I can't overemphasize playtesting. Playtesting is absolutely everything, and I think getting it, getting it in the hands of somebody else, you know, which is obviously sometimes if you're a third-party person, sometimes you're writing a thing and it's your own game and you're the only one that really knows how the system goes. You've got to, I would say, get with people, teach them, and then have them run it for people who don't know how to play it. You know, and that'll both test your system and also your scenario. But you've got to get that done, and then that'll be the feedback where it's like, well, we got to this room here, and there's no way to get to the other thing. Things that were super clear in your head when you saw it. If somebody else can't do that, give it to somebody else who can test it out for you and do it as many times as possible. And the best thing that you can do, and this is a very hard thing to put together, is get somebody else to run your adventure, and you be a player in that adventure, and then you shut the heck up and just see how it all.
Hold your head in your hand.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, let the tears like run down.
If you really want the full experience, make sure the other players have no idea you were like, this is the worst thing I've ever played. Like, it's like, oh. This is
I mean, you know,
Just to build on that, because I think when you're reading an adventure that isn't well constructed, let's say, and often it's the structure rather than the writing that's the problem I find. It's the sequence of information that isn't right, and you don't understand something at the right moment, and then you go in a wrong way, or you think something's one way, and then you read a paragraph the next page that says, actually, it's completely not what you thought it was. And
That
that's
is
just
actually one of the things a good
structure.
editor will catch.
Yes,
You have not
exactly.
mentioned the golden chicken yet, so, and then you're talking as if the character knows about
Exactly.
it,
So that seems really hard to get that right.
So going back to Brendan's thing about have multiple paths, have multiple hooks, have multiple paths into the dungeon in case they still, no matter big flashing neon sign, they're like, no, I'm just not feeling that.